I felt trapped. Like, I remember feeling like, oh, I don't know if I can get out of this.
You grew up fast.
It's because, like, when I was 12, I already knew that I had to pay for college.
You're taking a big risk.
Part of me wanted to prepare for this, like, ridiculous dream I had.
You thought you were going to stop streaming. What brought you back?
Honestly,
You may know Jaime as iGumdrop, where she streams to 300,000 fans with friends like Pokimane and Offline TV, or through her clothing brand, Epilogue, which has collaborated with Marvel. How did she get here? As a 12-year-old, Jaime needed money to help support her family, so she hustled, selling clothing and homework services to make thousands of dollars as a kid. To help pay for college, she started streaming, then took a huge risk by dropping out to go full-time and moving to LA. She succeeded and received so much hate that during COVID, she almost quit. Today, welcome Jaime as she shares her story on the Karat podcast. All right, 3, 2, 1. That was a good high five.
yeah, it was a good high five. It hurt.
I feel now we're doing this podcast where you're in a state of injury. Not only your hand, but your ankle too.
My ankle sprained. Now my hand hurts. It's okay.
I'm so impressed that you have a medical doctor's appointment for your ankle. And you're like, I'm going to push this back so I can see Eric on the podcast.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's that sprained, but when I went to the doctor, he was like, I think you have more problems than you think you do.
Like broken bones?
No, like he was like, I think we should do a few blood tests. And I was like, why? But that's what I'm finding out today. So it's not a huge doctor's appointment. I'm just seeing the results of everything.
Also, story of my life. I think you have more problems than you think you do.
Yeah.
Wait, so what prompted you to go to the doctor in the first place? Were you just like, my ankle
It's just
still
my
really
annual.
hurts?
It was my annual. Usually when you go to your annual doctor's appointment, they're like, oh, well, just like check your heart and stuff like that, right? But he went like really deep. He was like,
Wow.
how's your diet? Like, you know, how much do you sleep? Like, how's your mood and stuff like that? Like, he went in, and then so I was like, I felt like I was in a therapy session.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, he was like, you might have some problems, so let's just do a few blood tests. I don't know. I kind of zone out in the doctor appointments, to be honest. Like, I zoned
As he's
out.
telling you health critical information
Yes.
about your state of being.
Yeah, and then oh my gosh, he was like, oh, you're from New York, right? And doctors always say that because like when they look
Yeah.
at my insurance, it's from New York, but I'm in California. And they always are so intrigued with that. So he starts asking me a bunch of personal questions. He's like, what do you do? Blah, blah. And then I couldn't lie to the doctor. Like when it's the Uber driver, I lie. I'm like, oh yeah,
my
I'm just a
gosh.
student, whatever. But to the doctor, you can't lie to the doctor.
So does the doctor know you're a streamer?
Yes. And so I was like, I'm a content creator or streamer. And he's like, oh, so like Twitch? And I'm like, oh,
He's
gosh.
like, what's your handle?
Yes, he did. He asked me. Like right as he was typing in my labs, he like opens a new tab on his laptop. He's like, what's your handle? And I'm like,
It's like watching your stream. He's like, this is for medical purposes. I need you to be entirely honest.
yeah, because I told him I did cooking. So that's
Yeah.
why he was like, oh, my girlfriend loves cooking. Like, and so I just told him like, oh, I'm so embarrassed, especially because I went to the doctor like, I was not having the best day. Like I hadn't washed my
Yeah.
hair in so long and like I looked like crap. And I was like, if he posts on my page right now, it's going to be so embarrassing. So I'm like, please don't
He's like
ask
looking
me.
at you and he's looking at the stream and he's like, are you sure this is you?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Doctors
maybe
are
today.
savage.
I know. He was a super like, I feel like more millennial doctor. And then my
Wow.
nurse was super Gen Z. She was like taking my blood. And she was like, oh gosh, I really hope I don't have to like poke you twice. And then
He's
she
like, oh no.
she poked me twice and she was like, oh lol, I'm dead. Your veins are going crazy. And I'm like, what do you mean? But then she actually did a really good job. So I feel like she was just like joking with me.
Okay, but I feel like when you're in a medical room, you don't want to hear a medical professional say your veins are crazy
No,
right now.
I agree. But to be honest, it was like, I didn't mind it.
Okay.
She was also kind of hot.
Ooh.
And she was like blonde and stuff. So I was like, oh, okay, I kind of felt comfortable. It was kind of like a friend.
Pretty
doing it.
privilege.
Yeah, maybe.
You're like, I'm okay with this. But like if your Uber driver was like, wow, your veins are crazy.
Oh gosh, it's because like nurses and doctors already have we have like this respect for them,
Right.
And kind of listen to them, like whatever you want in the office. you
Like
know?
they're the people who come to you and they're like, cool, Jaime, like how often do you drink?
yeah, and you say the truth.
Like, have you done drugs?
Yeah.
When were you last active? And you're just looking at them. You're like, okay, I guess I tell you all of this. my
Yeah.
deepest, darkest secrets for medical purposes.
Yeah.
Like him pulling up your Twitch stream.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe he's like, this is why your mental health is not stable or something like that. I don't know.
Well, that's so funny because when I met you here a month ago, I thought you came off super stable.
I'm pretty stable, I'd say, but like definitely from like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
I'm like chaotically stable.
So it's what we like to refer to as a dynamic equilibrium.
Oh.
Like in any one given moment, you're not just like statically at a okay mood. What I'm hearing you say is it goes up, it goes down, and you manage it.
Yeah. I think like for a while I would try to chase like full stableness,
Yeah.
but it's just impossible, especially like with how my personality is. And so it's more so like I try to be okay with the highs and the lows. I'm just like,
I had the exact same realization. So I'm a pretty neurotic person. And
I remember you told me.
yeah, we talked about this. And what it means, I've learned I feel things really strongly compared to other people. I used to think everybody felt the way I did. It's like, oh no, did I hurt someone's feelings? Like super, super anxious.
Yeah.
Or like feeling really good about myself. Like I'm on top of the world.
Yeah.
And then I've realized from my co-founder and the people I've dated, like, no, like not everybody's like that. And then for a long time, I tried to be like, as you said, stabilize,
Yeah.
suppress. And I, like you, realized it's impossible. And it's more just, well, sometimes I'm up and sometimes I'm down.
Yeah. I had the same realization where how were you in high school?
I was a huge nerd who had
Okay.
no friends and just studied all the time and was super miserable. What about you?
Actually middle school, I was really social, like more like how
So
I am now.
you were the popular girl.
No. And then in
Oh.
high school, I went completely like quiet kid.
Yeah.
And I actually like had really good grades from like third grade, but then in high school, I really, really struggled and I like stopped going to school. Like my attendance rate was like 50%. And I would get like letters saying that I wasn't going to school and my parents were freaking out because they were like, our kid was in honor classes and now she's like cutting school. But I had a similar like kind of dynamic in my head where I was like, oh my God, I'm overthinking about all these things. Like this is what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah.
And so it's harder for you to simplify all that as a kid, especially when you go to high school and it's like so many social circumstances. And yeah, when I got older and met more people in the industry, I'm like, oh my gosh, like their brain is it makes so much more sense to me. And it's more simplified and just more calm, not so like all over the
Right.
place. But I feel like it's also like deepened my connections to
Yeah.
be super feelsy.
It's not a bad thing to feel really strongly. I'd like to think, as you
Yeah.
say, connections, it helps you connect with other people.
Yes, I agree.
What happened in high school? You said, so middle school, you were a star student, very social. High school, you were in class maybe 50% of the time. What changed?
I ended up going to a pretty bad high school because of my location. And I guess like the failure of that expectation really destroyed me. Like I definitely saw that my parents were not happy that I wasn't going to a really good school, because in New York there's like a hierarchy of like good schools. I don't know if you know, but you know the SAT, right?
Yeah.
So in New York, you actually take something called the SAT, which is middle school. You take it to get into a high school, and they have like ranked high schools. And so if you go to the top 3, you're just like set. And a lot of parents wanted their children to go there. For me, because of my location and just circumstances, like I didn't have enough guidance during like the application process for high schools. So I applied to high schools that like were never going to take me because they were so far. And I didn't know this stuff because like my parents didn't know. And like it just, I didn't have like an older sibling or anything. So then I ended up going to like a really not good high school. Like my high school is literally across from a graveyard. And I would sit in chemistry and like look out the window and be like, maybe it's like better if I'm there instead of here. I was so depressed. I would have so many dark jokes in my head. That's how I had a hard high school life, but it led to so much more that I didn't know. Like if I were to get a glimpse of my future from high school, I think my high school self would be like,
if high school
"What?"
you met current you, what do you think her
Oh my
feelings
gosh,
would
she'd
be?
run away. She'd be like so scared.
Why? She'd be
Because
like,
I was so socially anxious.
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel especially too because you are in a school where you're like your parents don't approve of it.
Yeah.
But you said also you didn't have that same level of guidance. I think people usually forget that, like, were your parents like first generation?
Yeah.
They
Well, immigrant. Is
immigrants.
that first generation?
Yeah,
But
immigrants.
doesn't that make me first generation?
Maybe there's 0th generation. So you're
Oh,
first
okay.
generation.
Oh, okay.
So I'm also first generation.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so I think there's like all this assumed context of how America works that like my parents didn't know because like we grew up super poor and my parents are just like trying really hard to make money and make sure I have enough money. And so in their heads is like, we need you to go to a really good school, get into a really good college so you can go and make money.
Yeah.
And like that was just like the number one thing they needed me to do above everything. And so when I didn't do that, they would also like really disapprove of it.
Yeah, and you kind of hold that responsibility too. Like when you see your parents struggle at such a young age, you kind of feel like you have shoes to fill or you have things you definitely need to do. It's not an option, really. So then when you don't fulfill those, it feels as a kid, you're just like so discouraged.
Did you have siblings or were you an only child?
I had a younger brother. I think if I had an older sibling, it would have been easier.
Because if you're the older child, it all falls on you.
Yeah, but in a way, it shaped my personality so much that I'm kind of happy I was the older sibling because I feel like if I wasn't the older sibling and I didn't come from an immigrant family, I might have been really princessy and like spoiled and a brat. So maybe it's better.
When you say that you felt like you had these shoes to step into and this responsibility to carry, I remember I watched your video speaking through the launch of your apparel company, Ebico.
Oh my gosh,
and you
that's
said
an
that
old
when you
video.
were 12, you took your mom's identification information
Yes.
so that you could start a wholesale clothing business. And that
Oh
by
my gosh, yes.
age 15, you were employing and then firing your boyfriend.
Oh my God, I shared that?
Yeah.
Wow. My younger self shared a lot. But yes, that's what I did. Actually, it's so funny how it started. It's because like when I was 12, I already knew that I had to pay for college. And I knew that, well, my parents were saving up for it, but I knew that if they even helped me pay some of my college, my brother wouldn't have any for his college. So I was like, I need to make money. And also I just wanted to buy my own stuff and I couldn't like ask my parents because I felt bad. So then when I was like 14, I would like wholesale buy clothes and then sell it in person first. So I would be like 12, 13 going to like Manhattan and Brooklyn and just like meet up with these other like 18-year-old girls and like sell them stuff. And so I would make a few bucks off of that. And then I started doing people's homework in middle school.
Wow.
Yeah, I type really fast. I type like 190 words per minute or something like that. Probably slower now, but I type really fast and I also just process words really well and I can like reinterpret information really well. So I was really good at doing like a variety of like science labs.
Wow. So you're smart.
I'm like, how I describe it is like I'm always, well, this is probably a mean thing to say about myself, but I'm always the like least impressive in the most impressive class.
Or
yeah, it's not a
like everyone,
healthy mindset. But it's just, I think that's why kids should not be in gifted classes because it kind of screwed with my head when I was in 3rd grade and they were like, we're going to put you in IGC, which literally stands for intelligently gifted kid.
wow.
So I thought I was like, oh, I'm smart. And then high school, college, it's a lot harder. It's more about work. It's more about how much you want to put yourself out there, stuff like that. And so I struggled a lot with that. And so I started to doubt myself. I was like, maybe I'm not as smart as I
because it's like, well, they told me from a young age I was destined for better things. And like, where are those better things?
I know, yeah.
Like I was in IGC as a 3rd grader, thank you.
Yeah, and then I ended up going to a really bad high school. So it just completely changed my perspective. But I'm still really glad I went through that just because I don't think it's healthy either to go through life with like the superiority complex or just like it's unfair to think like, oh, you're destined to do better things, but why not everybody else, right?
There's this former Yale professor named Amy Chua who said that she believes a lot of immigrants have this triple triad of traits that drive them to doing a lot in their lives. And it's number 1, you think you're worse than everybody else. But number 2, you also think you're better than everybody else.
Yes.
And number 3, you're willing to just work really hard. Like it's this combination of like, oh, like I can be better than this, but also I suck. And so I'm going to put in the work.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, it's kind of like even when I'm like mean to myself, I'm still kind of like this is so self-absorbed. Like it's not that big of
Wow.
a deal, you know? But for some reason, like my whole life I was like, no, it has to be like I have to succeed, blah blah blah. But then I take a step back and I'm like, I don't know, something about it just feels off, right? It doesn't feel right, but it comes so natural to us.
When I met you, we both, when we discussed Enneagrams,
Oh yeah.
we're type 4, wing 3,
Yes.
which for those of you who don't know, type 4 are people who've come into this world really trying to figure out, who am I?
Yeah, identity crisis.
And type 3 is the gunner who's really competitive and like trying to do well.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of hearing you describe that now, where you're part of you is like, I need to do well and I need
Yeah.
to accomplish and achieve. And part of you is like, but what is this for?
Yeah, yeah.
And why am I doing this?
Yeah, and so I guess my system sometimes doesn't feel like it aligns with what I want. So it's like if I see a type 3, like someone who's super achievement, goal oriented, they know what they want. So the steps to get there are very, very clear to
They
them.
just need to go execute.
Yes, they just need to execute. And then for like, I feel like for type 4s, like you're so focused on the feeling of it too.
Yeah.
Like, does this feel good? Is this the right thing? You're so focused on like the meaning behind it. And there's so many things, like no matter what industry you go to or what career you choose, you're going to have moments where you don't feel good.
Right.
And so I've really had to learn like, it's okay if I don't feel good. I still need to respect what I want, like what I decided what I want and like go through with it. But it's a process.
So when you were still in high school and you were not enjoying where you are, you were looking across to the graveyard, you were also so aware, you're like, I need to make money to pay for college.
Yeah.
And hustling, meeting 18-year-olds, selling them clothing,
Yeah.
like running a company, setting up a website.
Oh, yeah, I did that too. Yeah.
Oh, I love how you're like looking back at past Jamie. You're like, wow, she put in a lot of work.
No, I sometimes think past Jamie is so much smarter than current Jamie. Because current Jamie found like meaning and stuff. But I think, okay, so me hustling super hard at like 14, 15, 16 for money. By the time I was like 16 and a half, right? And I was like making money, I was like, but this doesn't feel good. It's like, it doesn't feel good. Like, I don't feel good like reselling things that aren't mine. I don't feel good like doing homework for someone, even though they get a really good grade. And like, it got bad. Like, the kids would come back to me and be like, can you do it again? And stuff like that. And it was like, I was like, oh gosh, this is kind of like morally not great. So then I was like, I completely stopped, and then I stopped making money. And then like a few years later, I started streaming. And I remember streaming was like, I didn't make any money,
Yeah.
but I had already learned the lesson that like, even if I make a lot of money, it doesn't make me happy, which is kind of weird because I think if I hadn't learned that, maybe in my 20s, I would have been a lot more money driven, which might have been good for, my material items, but it's okay.
No, it's like you already had your training arc in school where
Yeah.
you're doing people's homework, you're selling stuff. You're like, this isn't worth it. And so when you started streaming, it wasn't even making money in the beginning, but you're like, oh, I like this.
Yes, yeah.
I remember in college, you were studying computer science.
Yeah, I was.
What happened?
Computer science is hard. I mean, I was fine year 1 and 2,
Mm-hmm.
but balancing that with streaming by year 3, I was like, oh, this is not gonna work. And I just felt really bad putting 50% into each. Like, I couldn't put 100% in my studies, and I couldn't put 100% into streaming. But the reason why I did computer science is because I wanted to work in gaming. Like, I thought I was gonna be in that industry, and so that's why I wanted to do computer science. But then I was streaming, and I was like, well, I think streaming is like a better shortcut to work in gaming. So I was like, maybe I'll focus on streaming because, oh, actually, the story is kind of crazy. Okay, so I think it was like winter semester.
Yeah.
And I was ready to like start my 3rd year of computer science. And I remember one of my classes was like, I had a professor where he was like, if you take the final exam on the first day and you pass, you don't have to come to class. You'll just get a full
Wow.
A. And I was like, okay. So I was so ready to study for this thing. Last minute, my friend Aria, she's like, come to California. I would always save up money and go to California like during the summers to see all my friends because I barely had friends in New York. I had like a few, but most of my friends that I felt really connected to were online. And so I was like, okay, screw it, I'll go. So I came to California during the winter break, and then I was just like living in my friend's living room and streaming there while studying for this exam. And then like 4 weeks in, my break is about to end, but like streaming is kind of taking off for me. And I just decided to like take the semester off. And then I never moved back. Like I just moved.
And you're like, and I just stayed here, and now I'm here now today.
Yeah, so I never moved back. I ended up dropping out. And then it worked out, I guess. So yeah.
How did you? So I'm trying to picture high school you, where you're just like grinding for dollars, trying to pay for college, and then college you're taking a big risk to save up money and say, I'm just gonna go to LA now.
So my head, like I never verbally said like I want to move to California and do content creation or stream. I never said that to anyone because it's really scary, especially when you're like 18, 19 and like everyone's doubtful, especially content was not cool back then. Like it was kind of just like, ugh, that's kind of cringe.
Nerd.
Yeah. And so I didn't verbalize that, but a part of me wanted to prepare for this like ridiculous dream I had. And so I did save up money, like to just, if I wanted to move to LA, then I would be able to. So I feel like I kind of like action wise set myself up for it, but because I never verbally said it, it feels like it was a spontaneous thing.
It's almost like you knew you wanted to do this, but to say it out loud as a dream, as a plan, that's really scary because once you've put it out there, it's like, what if I fail?
Yeah.
So you internally had this, but you never explicitly said it. So then it wasn't even like, in reality, a spontaneous, let me go to LA. It was kind of like, well, yeah, this is what I always wanted to do.
Yeah.
How did you start? Because you mentioned beginning streaming in school, like well before this LA trip. What got you to that? Because like years ago, this was like a very, kids these days, they're like, yeah, I want to stream. Like this like wasn't a thing.
Yeah, it wasn't. I remember I actually borrowed I rented one of my friend's PCs to stream because I couldn't, I could get one, but again, I knew that I might hypothetically move to LA. So I was very like frugal.
Oh, so you were like saving.
Yeah, I was like saving. I was a better saver back then than now, honestly, because now it's like I have to invest so much into my own career. But back then I was like, oh, like I'll just.
How did you even like make money as a college student to save for this trip?
Well, it's all the money I made from like high school too. But actually, by that time, I was making money from streaming.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I still had a lot of money from
You used your high school savings initially kind of to hold you over. Wait, can I ask, like, how much did you make as a high school student? Like,
I was making like, it was very inconsistent because like I would be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna hustle these 3 months, but in a month I would be able to make like 3 to 4K, which is like a lot for high
much
school.
as a high school student.
Yeah, so it like I don't want the viewers to think I was making 4K every month because it was super inconsistent.
But this is when you like really applied yourself.
This is at the
hit
peak.
4K
Like
a
my
month.
peak, I would hit like 4K. But when I was hustling in middle school, like doing like homework and stuff like that, that was like maybe not that much. Maybe like I remember at 1 week I made like 200 to 300 off homework, and I was like, oh my god, I'm rich.
Okay, so as a middle schooler, you're making scale it out like $15,000 a year. As a high schooler, if you actually
middle school maybe like 4K in a year because I remember I would obviously like take breaks and like
of course, because you're not every single week, you're not pushing that hard. And same thing in high school, like in a good month you can make like 4K.
Yeah, so I definitely had like a good amount of savings, but I was very generous with my money in high school. Like I remember back then people didn't have like credit cards or PayPal or debit card, right? I remember I had like a PayPal debit card or something because I was making a lot of money through PayPal. And so this is kind of strange, but like in middle school, I would just like help people pay for things because they wanted to buy stuff online without their parents knowing.
And you would just spot them.
Yeah. And I was a little too generous with my money. So
you didn't even, this wasn't like, hey, I'll spot you, but pay me back with interest. This was like, you know what? You're my friend.
Yeah,
Just go
I
for
think
it.
I felt these were all kids that were just like me, like coming from immigrant family. Like it's strange because where I grew up, our parents were never home because they're always working. So it creates this very like independent hustle culture in kids really young, at least where I grew up.
You grew up fast.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of my friends grow up fast too. I saw a lot of good things, bad things, but I just felt like I liked that culture. Like, even though I wasn't close to anyone, it still felt like we were there to support each other. So
it's like personally, you're not super close, but there's just like this understanding of like you are going through what I'm going through, and it is super hard and it's miserable. But like, hey, you need to buy something. I've got this money. Let me help you out.
Yeah. So I was very generous back then. And people would ask me to buy things that I understood why they couldn't ask their parents. And it just, my people please you is like, I felt good to like offer them that like relief. Yeah, so I remember that. But yeah, somehow kind of worked out.
Yeah, I mean, you worked hard for this money. Like, again, $4K a month. I know this was inconsistent, but consistently scaled out, that's like $50K a year.
Okay,
like,
it wasn't $50K a year.
I know, because you weren't doing it every month, but that's still like you had the earning potential.
The earning potential was definitely there.
You had the earning potential of higher than like the average American man.
Yeah.
As like a high schooler.
Yeah, so I don't know. I hustled when I was young, and I actually wish I could like go back and get some of that, because now as an adult it's harder for me to be as like shameless as I was back then. Like, I didn't think like, oh, doing someone's homework is bad, or like, you know, like drop shipping. You know, drop shipping is not very good. There's a reason why it's kind of contributes to fast fashion. There's a lot of reasons why drop shipping.
Yeah, but you needed money.
I did need money, but back then I didn't know about this. I was just like, ooh, like I could sell this for more money and then I'll have more money. But then like now I'm so aware of everything.
Yeah.
It's harder for me to be more, I guess, like that focused on
like
a goal.
Ruthlessly business minded.
Yeah, I don't have a big enough reason to be like, yeah, I really need this money. I'll do it. Even if I like, you know, yeah, it's weird.
Well, like if you still had that mentality, what do you think would be different about what you do now?
Well, I definitely would make more money, but I do think I've built a lot of great friendships and connections just off of being genuine. And there's been moments where, you know, I'll have like a little mistake, but because my friends know my intentions so well, they will easily understand that it wasn't my intention, kind of thing. So those moments, I'm like, okay, maybe it's good that like I've been very true to myself, and I have been really mindful, I guess, but I still think there's a lot for me to like be able to learn from my past self. I like wish I could talk to her, but I can't. I mean, I guess I could, but I don't.
No, I think back, my dad came from China where he grew up like super poor on the streets, whatever. And that sort of shameless, ruthless mentality you describe, he had to have that in order to survive.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in high school, my dad was like, you know, see that guy? I was like, yeah. He's like, his dad's a millionaire. Go be friends with this kid.
Wow.
And like, if we looked at it now, coming from a place of relative privilege and graciousness and abundance, we're like, well, that's really fucked up to tie being friends with somebody to monetary gain. Like, that's fucking terrible. Yeah. And not only is that bad from a personal POV, because that's not the type of relationships and friendships you want to build, it also doesn't even work because you're transparent and people know what's going on. But for him, that was so natural and important because you just like have to survive.
Yeah. I mean, how did you process that? Like, were you at first like, oh, okay, I'll do that, and then you did it and felt like it was weird? I
didn't do it because it just felt really bad and weird.
So you already knew that it felt weird.
Right. But it's still always stuck in my head. And so for like a very, very long time, I would feel this very weird mix of obligation, but also guilt around, hey, like I am always trying to do better and figure out business opportunities. And if I'm becoming friends with you, because I just remember my dad saying this and me having such a weird reaction, I'd be like, am I becoming friends with you just because I want to become friends with you? Or am I becoming friends because there's just this optimized, ruthless voice in the back of my head that's like, oh, like something might come out of it. And I'd feel so guilty. But oh, then I'm not a real friend. And like years later, it's basically landed in a spot where I'm just like, you know what? I do business with the people that I'm friends with, and I'm friends
Yes.
with the people that I do business with. And like, yeah, it's tricky to navigate sometimes, but like it's all sort of blended together and it's not like a bad thing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's kind of crazy because I went through the same thing, but reversed. Like, my parents were, they, if anything, told me not to talk to important people. They're like my parents would always say, like, I don't know. It was weird because my parents loved me so much and they put so much confidence in me, but also they were like, there's some things that aren't for us. So like rich people things, stuff like that. So I felt very like scared to go for it. And even now, sometimes I'll talk to people and I question whether or not I'm like worth talking to them, I guess. So, but in a way, I had the same thought process you did. I was like, okay, like what is my intention behind talking to this person? And also, if even if there's like 10 to 15% of like your ruthless business mind going like, oh, this would be good for you, I think that's okay. Like as long
Yeah.
as the majority of it is also because I know that even if it was a good opportunity, if I didn't get along with someone or if I
Right.
didn't feel attracted to their energy or feel like I could also offer them something, then I wouldn't want to go for it. Like still has to feel right. So yeah, it's just very, very interesting because I went through the same exact thought process.
That ruthless, that shamelessness. I remember you did an interview with Tube Filter where you talked
Oh
about,
yeah.
one of the things you said why you started streaming, it was very much like, hey, like when you don't have much, you have to take risks.
That is true. I wish I had that sometimes. Like when you first start content, which is like for anyone who wants to start content, the beginning is the best part. You get to do anything you want. I think it feels weird to your like friends IRL and maybe your family, but to the internet, you're just like this fresh blank slate and it's just so refreshing. You get to do whatever type of content you want. And then as you grow your content creator career, you start to gain like weird preferences or you start to not romanticize it as much. And I think this is apparent in almost any industry or
Yeah.
field. You just start to not have this like the bright, what is it called? Rose colored glasses?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You don't have that anymore. And then you start to also have like build preconceived judgments on things from what you know behind the industry. And you start judging yourself a bit more. At least that's the experience I had. I mean, have you seen the Dunning-Kruger?
The Dunning-Kruger effect. The more you know about something, the harder it is for you to say, I'm really good at this. It's
Yeah.
easy for you to be like, I'm amazing when you have no idea what you're doing.
Yep. And so I feel like I went through that for content creation. And now I'm like kind of on the slope up.
Yeah, because you've been through so much more. So
Yeah.
in a way, what I'm hearing from you is like when you started, it was sort of this beautiful mix of, again, going back to Enneagram 4 Wing 3, it was a beautiful mix of that 3 in you. This very like, I'm going to do something with this, but also this 4 because you like don't even know enough to know what you should or should not be doing. So you're
Yes.
kind of like, I'm going to find myself and do what I like.
Yeah, it was honestly when I look back at my journey, I'm like, wow, that was very Enneagram 4 Wing 3 of you.
Yeah, you're like, wow, this really was me.
Yeah. So it's so interesting, but I actually don't know many type 4s.
The theory behind Enneagrams is that it comes from childhood wounds.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the concept is...
I mean, what doesn't though?
I know, right? Everything we do was in reaction or defense to what we experienced as kids. So the
Yep.
theory behind Enneagrams is we experience some type of hurt or lack of validation that becomes your driving motivation. So for example, a type 8 Enneagram is all about power and control. And I know this because I've dated people who are type 8s.
Really?
Yeah, and so like for them, it's because growing up they felt so powerless that that was their childhood wound where it became so important to them now as an adult to try and assert that control. Like there's this interesting concept where like the thing you really want is the thing you grew up not having that you'll never feel like you have enough. Like if you really, really try and want to be rich, it's because you always feel poor.
Yeah.
If you try really hard to look pretty, it's because you don't feel pretty. And so it's like if you really want power, it's because you felt powerless.
Yeah.
And so for type 3s, which are very achievement oriented, right? It's all around like, I need to accomplish things in order to have value in this world. If I don't accomplish anything, I'm worthless.
Yeah.
And type 4, it's very much like, oh, I don't matter.
Yeah. You're kind of like super woke as a type 4 because it's true. Like
Yeah.
We don't matter.
Yeah. And so the whole drive is to be like, I want to matter.
Yeah.
There are billions of people who've lived and died on this earth.
Yes.
How do I matter?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's hard because I obviously have these goals and achievements I want to reach, but I also have this feeling that there's like, it's so much more than that. And so I'll get lost in the sauce. I think something that is important for type 4s or anyone who's just like very emotional or in their fields in general, I think just kind of detaching your state of being with your feelings can kind of be helpful, because like I'll be like content in life, but I'll still be able to be like super sad for like 2 hours. I don't know. It's so strange, but I'm sure you probably go through similar. Yeah.
When you think back on all the things you've been through, when do you remember times when you've been most in your feelings? Which could be good. It could be that productive passion, or it could be sad when you're just like, nothing matters.
Yeah, I think that's where I can improve on, because I can remember a lot of moments where I felt really sad, but something about it was really like beautiful to me. And so I would write it down in a way that, I guess, to romanticize my life. Like I'm very good at romanticizing my feelings. When I first moved here, I felt like a super like, oh my God, like you did it. Like this is your dream. And then I felt this first step of like, I showed up for myself. I like took a risk for myself. I did it myself. It did give me a sort of confidence. I think from 18 to 21, I had like a great confidence.
Yeah.
Especially because throughout high school, like I had none of it. I was so like insecure and scared. And like, I really thought like, oh, my life is over when I couldn't get good grades, when I was like cutting school, when I couldn't make friends. I was like, everything that my like bubbly child self wanted, I failed to get in high school. And so I think I did go on a high when I started streaming, because I felt belongingness.
Wow.
I felt like I could express myself. And I also met a lot of great friends that I felt like I got along with really, really well. And so I did ride that high for a while. Pandemic came, that's when I started struggling a bit again, because again, you're in the industry for longer. You have more of like a group of like reality, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was also like, I started to fall back to like my high school mindset where I felt really scared to try new things. And so I kind of just shut down and I stopped doing content for a while. But then I made a clothing brand during that time. So I guess I was still kind of productive.
I love you're like, oh, my not productive era was launching a company that's now done collaborations with Marvel.
No, but it's so funny because I don't know. I definitely think I used to be insecure about like, I guess, my work ethic, but I think I'm just super work hard, play hard, because like during that time when I was launching my clothing brand, like it was not pretty. Like I was at home, like my place was a mess. Like I was like in my fields every day. I remember I was like struggling to find like a therapist. I tried like 3-4 therapists and I felt like I couldn't. I felt trapped. Like I remember feeling like, oh, I don't know if I can get out of this, kind of low.
That's the scariest thing, where you're like, I don't see a way out. Do I just keep feeling this?
Yeah, but I think, I mean, not to bring it back to the Enneagram thing, but I feel like my wing 3 really helps me get out.
It just helped you keep grinding.
That I'm just like, I have to, like, I don't have an option. I have to do something. And so even if I really felt like therapy wasn't going to help, and like I would go through a session and be like, oh, that was not helpful, I would be like, it's fine. Like, at least I'm trying.
Yeah, like I got to keep working at it. Like, that was sort of the saving grace.
Yeah. Eventually I found a really good therapist.
You said that you tried multiple therapists and it wasn't clicking. Like, what, when you'd go with them, would help you realize like this isn't the one versus the one that you did find?
You know, sometimes I'm not able to verbalize my intuition. I'm a strong believer that like it's good to listen to your intuition, because I think that there's parts of your brain that doesn't process or verbalize things. But then later on, like especially when I got older, I was like, oh, I know why I did that. Even though back then I couldn't really express it verbally. What was the question again?
It's very much how you knew when the therapist was right versus the others you tried. You said your intuition helped guide you.
Yeah, my intuition. Eventually, I just found one that felt right. But I do encourage people to try to find a good therapist. It's obviously not cheap, but it definitely changed the trajectory of my 20s.
I get that a lot. And your point on intuition, I think is a really good one, because so much of what we do, it's being driven by our feelings and background, like beneath the conscious mind, right? Like there is an unconscious Jaime, there's an unconscious Eric that is guiding a lot of her decisions. And if you're getting that gut feeling, it might be something you feel deep on that unconscious level that hasn't yet bubbled its way into conscious thought, but it's still there. I started therapy. Well, I tried therapists throughout my 20s, but look, I'm also Asian American. And so there's stigma, right? And I remember when I was really depressed in college, my dad was like, stop feeling sad. Like you're making your mom sad. It's like this problem to be solved. And I remember seeing this therapist. I used to work at Meta at Facebook. And as a company resource, they connect you. So I saw this one. I remember, and it was like this lovely woman, but she was just like, why are you trying so hard? And I was like, oh, wow. She just like really doesn't understand the same feelings you described earlier of this like wanting to do right, to honor your parents, right? Like wanting to accomplish, wanting to achieve, but like also having like all these feelings around like, am I doing this for the right reasons? Like, why am I doing it? And then 4 years ago, I was in the corporate world for like 7-8 years. I was just so tired of it. I was going through a breakup. I remember talking to a coworker who had done therapy, being like, do you think I need therapy? And she's like, tell me about your family. And I started crying. And I was like, why am I crying? She's like, you should definitely do therapy. So I saw a different therapist. And this therapist, she also was an immigrant. She was also like a person of color, like Asian American. And I don't think that's necessarily required for your therapist. But for me, I just felt like there's so much more understanding around like the drives and motivations. And now I've been speaking with her for like over 4 years, which is like insane.
Yeah, I think it's because there's so much you don't have to explain.
Yeah.
I do think a good therapist will get to that understanding
exactly,
if you tell
regardless
them.
of background.
But I think because it was so important to you, like it held so much meaning, and it was like the core knot that you had to untie.
Yeah.
It was really important to have that. But yeah, I've been in my therapist for 4 years now too.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
Congratulations. And thank you, therapists.
Yeah.
So you're in 2020, you're going through multiple therapists, you're working really hard on your apparel brand.
Yeah.
Which from what I saw in your video, like you literally had to find the manufacturer. Like you did this yourself. You negotiated with different vendors, you like did the designs yourself. Like you didn't just find someone and be like, here's my logo, slap it on. You like made your own line.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to prove myself. And I remember when I was like 20, or during the pandemic, I think I was like 21, I wanted to prove myself creatively too, which I couldn't get through streaming. It was hard for me to do that through streaming. So I felt the need to do that. And so I think I prided myself in doing everything alone, which now I'm learning that it's good to work with other people.
Right.
Trying to learn how to work with other people was a journey for me as well, but it definitely helps a lot.
When you say you felt like you couldn't prove yourself creatively as much through streaming, what do you mean by that? Like in 2020, what was like the iGumdrop streamer persona?
Oh God. It was just a lot of like Twitch culture is it's kind of like you have a bunch of kids in your chat. Like it's kind of like you have like a class of kids, and it's like you want to entertain them. So you definitely lose a bit of yourself if you try to cater to mass audience when it comes to live streaming, just because, you're working with like shorter attention spans too. So, I just felt not fully myself, or I was like growing out of the dopamine hit I would get from streaming, and I wanted to do something more meaningful and like creatively sustainable, I guess, if that makes sense. So not to say that I think that if you start streaming, like you get that high, like that dopamine high, and you want to like cater to the chat and the audience. I think that's great. Like I enjoyed my time doing that too. It's just like, it's pretty normal to.
It's like people pleasing to the extreme.
Yes, yeah.
Because it's not even just to the people around you. It's to like the potentially thousands, maybe even millions of people who are watching you.
Yeah. So it was a little bit draining for me, especially because I went from like not being very social in high school straight to like public.
Yeah.
And I would get judged really heavily. There was like a forum, it's taken down now, but there was a forum where there were like 40 pages about me.
Oh my God.
And people were like just not saying nice things. They would like take my photos and like try to like Photoshop me without makeup and stuff like that. It was really bad. And I remember I read that when I was like 1920, and it was really damaging for me, especially because I already didn't feel very confident. So all these things kind of like built up, and I just wanted to take a break from like streaming. I
Yeah.
actually thought I was done from content. That's why I wanted to do the clothing brand. Yeah.
That's insane to, as a 19, 20-year-old, like, gosh, like, I'm still trying to figure out who I am now. And like, that's like,
Yeah.
I'm like over 30, right? But like, as a 19, 20-year-old, like, you're literally putting together the pieces of who you think you want to be. And then you
Yeah.
go on the internet and you see people having like 40 pages bashing you.
I know. I was like, oh, is this who I am kind of thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a lot, but it taught me a lot. And honestly, I think I thought about it a lot. I was like, hey, the people bashing me were probably also going through the same things that
Right.
I went through. Like when I was 16, 17, like, I mean, I didn't go on a forum and like talk about
I love how
stuff.
you're like, I empathize with you, but also
Yeah.
I wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
Why were you?
Yeah, literally. But at the same time, I'm like, I can understand how someone can get to a place where, and like they would do that. And then like, do you know the word copium?
Yeah, I've seen it in chat a lot. It's like opium, but I'm coping. Like, oh, the
Yeah,
optimistic
coping.
part.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my copium was like, okay, you know what? If I could have been their outlet to relieve some of like whatever they're going through, that's better for me to just like move on from.
You're right. You're like trying to add the meaning here. You're like,
Yeah.
well, people maybe felt better after shitting on me all day.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, and then it's also I watch a lot of reality TV.
Ooh.
Just because my brain is always on. So
Yeah,
I
me
actually like
too.
reality TV because it like turns my brain off.
Yeah, because you don't have to think.
Yeah.
You're just absorbing.
Yeah. And so when I like sometimes I'll finish an episode, I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so mad. I'll go on like their Reddit and like read about them. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like they're just characters to me. Like they're just like
And you're just a character to your
to other
viewers.
people. Yeah. So I'm like, that's kind of detached me, or not detached me, but it's kind of like grown my skin a bit thick. I'm like, you know, I might be a thought in their head for like 5 seconds and they'll type it out, but like they're going to move on with their day. They're going to go eat dinner. They're going to take a poop just like me. And then they're going to move on. So yeah.
When you said you almost, like, you thought you were going to stop streaming. Like, that's why you
Yeah.
launched the apparel brand.
Yeah.
What brought you back?
Honestly, I just missed it. Like, okay, the stress of running your own clothing brand or a company is insane. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything more stressful than like becoming an entrepreneur by yourself. Like, it's
Yeah,
so
you were doing it
stressful.
all.
Yeah, and so I was like, dang, I had it good before this.
I love how you're like, this is really hard. Maybe we'll give this streaming thing
Yeah.
another shot.
Yeah, so I was like, I liked that. Oh, also, I was like, I think I hit like 23 and I was like, oh crap, I'm getting old. It's like when I'm like, sorry.
Okay. Sitting
but
over
when
here
you're-
being 32.
Once you hit 23, every year you turn, you're like, oh, I'm old.
You're like, I'm now past this age where I can sing along Taylor Swift's 22.
Yeah, I did do that on my 22nd birthday. Wait, what was I talking about again?
So you were saying that when you were 23, you were like, I'm old now.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And then I was like, oh, okay. So I have so many different hobbies and I get really interested in everything, right? And I can't do it all. So then I learned a way to prioritize it. I'm like, okay, let me do the things I can now. So if I want to learn dancing, it's better to do it now. If I want to like learn how to grow plants, I can do that when I'm 60. So I should save that for later. So I've just kind of reprioritized everything. The one that kind of slipped through is cooking. Like I just love cooking so much that I just end up doing it.
Yeah, even though you could do it if you were 60. You're like, I'm still going to do this now.
Yeah.
Okay.
But other than that, I try to prioritize it. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to want to be in front of the camera when I'm older. I'm going to be so much lazier and I'm not going to want to like put effort into my appearance and stuff. So I'm like, okay, let me just give myself a chance to do content now.
Yeah.
And frequently when I get stuck like not doing things or I get stuck in a rut, I'm like, okay, what would my, like, I'll be like,
Wow.
okay, you're on your deathbed at 90. What do you want to see like 24-year-old Jaime do? Like, what do you want to show your great grandchildren? Like, what do you want to have on the walls and stuff? And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. And I get out of bed and then,
Wow. You're doing this for future generations.
yeah, for me at least.
Do you know if you want to have kids?
I'm leaning towards yes,
Mm-hmm.
just because I get bored easily, and I think like once I'm freaking like 60, if I don't have kids, I'm gonna be so bored. Like
You can still stream.
I'm 60.
Yeah.
I find like some sort of excitement to like having a mini me though. Like
Jamie Jr.
yeah, like remember when I was like, oh, I wonder if I could have been like a spoiled brat in another universe. Like I would love to make that brat.
You're like, I want you to have all the privilege that I didn't, so you can grow up hella spoiled.
Yeah, it's weird because like in my industry, a lot of people don't want kids. A lot of content creators don't want kids. Just in general, it's a more open discussion now to not want to have kids, and I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
I do think because I grew up struggling, a part of me feels like this desire to like provide that.
Oh, it's like in a way
Yeah.
you want to be the parent to provide the environment that maybe you didn't necessarily have.
Yeah. And so I think about that too. I thought about it a little bit. Once I really start imagining kids, I'm like, okay, I'm not ready. But
Like in theory.
yeah, but I'm open. I'm definitely open to having kids. Yeah.
I also really love you describe this framework where you're all like, what are the things that 60-year-old Jamie really wishes she had done that were way easier when I was 23, when I was
Yes.
younger? And so it sounds like part of the reason why you went back into streaming was because you're like, this is something I really can only do now.
Yeah.
Part of it was because running your own company by yourself was really, really stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, especially when you run a company, like, there's areas where I could have like delegated work, but the
Yeah.
area I cannot delegate is just the content creation part. Like,
Right.
I
That's just
had to
you.
do that myself. And so also I just felt it's weird because I'm a very creative person. And so that's why I think if I had the privilege, I would have been one of those, like, I would have been super like artistic, etc. But because of how I grew up, I ended up having more of a business mind as well. So then I would really battle. I'd be like a part of me would be super hard business core, like, oh my God, like Epico, which is my clothing brand, I was like, has so much potential. Maybe I should look for like investors. Maybe I would like do a deck or whatever. And my business mind would be so happy, but my creative mind would just be like, ugh. So then I would design stuff, right, to kind of get that creative outlet. But then it was so conflicting because you know how it's hard to switch your brain on different tasks.
Yep.
That's what I was struggling with. I would like wake up and go on a call, like a business call, and then I'd have to like do my hair and like play, I don't know, a random game on stream or something, or like do a cooking stream or
Wow.
something.
They're so different.
They're so different. And so I was like having an identity crisis. I was like, who am I?
You're like, am I businesswoman entrepreneur, Jamie, or am I iGumdrop?
Yeah. And so I have concluded, I swear to God, when you hit, like I turned 20, I just turned 25. When you hit 25, something just like, okay, my snap is really weak, but it just, something just clicks and you kind of feel like you know what you want to prioritize more. And I think like there's so many great people out there who would be much better at business things. Like they're
Yeah.
more logical, they're more, you know, business oriented. But what I can create creatively is something that will be original to me.
Unique to you.
Yeah. So I'm leaning more towards that now.
Okay, one, I love how like you're dropping these pearls of wisdom and you're 25 years old. No, it speaks to your earlier point how fast you had to grow up. And also like you went and did your own thing. You dropped out of college, you were a streamer, you are a streamer, you ran your own business. I think those are first things that like you have done and are doing things that a lot of people might not get to until they're like mid 30s.
Really?
You're in the accelerated track.
Dang. I mean, that's really nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah,
But
you're living life.
yeah, it's hard for me to feel that way sometimes just because I've been in it. Like, I've been on the grind for so long, I guess.
How long have you been streaming now for?
Oh, gosh. Maybe like almost 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah, almost 7 years. And then even before that, I kind of was always like focused on what I was going to do with my life. But I definitely lose perspective, like being a creator for so long. You
Yeah.
lose perspective, like especially when I did my clothing brand, I was like, oh my God, I don't know how much to pay people because like I don't have a good concept
Right.
of like,
Like I'm in my own little world.
yeah, I don't have a concept of that. And so sometimes I do wish, I always wonder, I'm like, what if I did finish college? What if I kept my 20s private? You know, because there was a lot of, I guess, negative repercussions that I had to process from being on the internet at a young age. Sometimes I do wonder, like, what if I protected myself from that? But I also think, I feel like from a young age, I was set to have a very chaotic
Yeah, you're like, I was meant for this.
Yeah.
Like, I might have wished for something different, but I was born into the chaos.
Yeah, I think so too.
How do you handle, you mentioned negative repercussions and this form. I assume it's because you are a woman on the internet. How have you over time learned to like handle that?
Honestly, okay, sometimes like if something is too much for me to process, my brain's just like don't process. So maybe it's gotten to that point, but it's just like a skill practice thing. And actually it's funny because nowadays when people say a comment that I feel like they're like, oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna get her with this, it usually doesn't get me. But like if they're very specific about something, like I'm like,
Or
ow.
like an insecurity?
No, not like physical insecurities don't hurt me anymore because of that forum. I was just like, oh, like I'm like so thick skinned.
You've
Like,
been through the worst of it.
yeah, actually, and also another thing is there is no worse critic out there in the world for me except myself.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's how I deal with it. I'm like, well, that's not as bad as how I look at myself. So,
Oh no. I love you look at the haters and you're like, ha, you don't even know.
yes, I'm like, you don't even know. Like, I was like, they'll try to
Oh.
flame me, and I'll be like, that could be a lot worse of a flame if you really, if you lived in my shoes. So yeah, that's how I get through it. I guess it's probably not the healthiest, but it works for me, I guess.
And it helps you process.
Yeah, I kind of just don't process sometimes. Like I still have like natural, like if I post something, sometimes I won't look at the comments for like weeks.
Like a little bit of distance.
Yeah, because I'm so scared. And then I'll look at it a month later and I'll be like, dang, the feedback was good. The content is good.
Yeah.
Had I, and you know, my business brain is like, you should respond to people to build your
increase
community,
engagement.
increase
Yeah.
engagement. But then the feelsy part of me is like, oh, it makes me feel so uncomfortable. So then I don't do it. And then I'm like, dang, I should have done it. Not because it was a good engagement opportunity, but
Yeah.
also because I felt meaning behind those comments. And I'm like, oh, I wish I responded to
Aw.
this. So I'm trying to improve that. But yeah, it's getting better.
You've
slowly.
now described, so childhood iGumdrop, iGumdrop,
Yeah.
if you will. Very bubbly, a lot of energy, doing everyone's homework,
Yeah.
spotting everyone money.
Yeah.
Then high school, hard,
Hard.
depressing, looking at the graveyard across the street.
Yep.
Going into college, deciding to start streaming, taking the time to save up money for this LA trip, taking the really big risk, coming to LA, having this amazing glow up arc where you're
Yeah.
like, I have found my people
Yeah.
and I understand myself.
Yeah.
Then COVID, you're like, fuck.
Well, here again.
You're like, people are mean.
Yeah.
Am I really putting myself to make use of my talents? Let's start a company. Then going, this is also really hard. And new framework. I got to do what I can do only when I'm young.
Yes.
Coming back to streaming.
Yes.
And so in your current era,
Yes. You caught me at a good era.
Yeah,
Not gonna
this-
lie.
it's like if we did this in 2020, you'd be like,
I need help.
I'm stopping this always. So you're in a good era right now.
Yes.
What is the focus? Like, what are the things that you want to do?
You know, it changes for me every year because I remember last year I was like, I really want to creatively prove myself. And
Yeah.
now I'm like, well, actually, I don't know. I'm recalibrating right now. I do think my focus is creating meaningful content just because that's what feels the best to me right now. And also, my parents are retiring soon, so I would love to move them down here.
Oh,
Yeah, like so.
Are they
maybe
still
a
in New
year.
York?
Yeah, they're still in New York, and they're retiring like next year. So that's like one of my biggest goals. I think it's one of those things where I can finally feel like, oh, I did well. Like I haven't really reached that in my life yet. And I mean, you know, like how people are really like, oh, you have to buy a house, but that's like not true. Like it's like I remember I thought about buying a house, but I was like, oh no, like for a person like me, like renting is okay for now. But for my parents who are so like Asian immigrant, I know how much a house would mean for them. And like, I know they see that, they see my success, but I know that if I were able to get them a house here, they'd really feel like all of us would feel that like, it's kind of like the American dream sort of thing.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's my focus right now. And also just making meaningful content. And I am still running my clothing brand, so I guess all of that.
I love how you're like, yeah, I decided like running a company was really hard. So I just decided to add
To do
more on
both,
and I'm streaming
yeah.
again. Also, your streams, your content, it's so well edited.
Oh, thank you.
Multiple people have actually told me, and it's like, oh, I'm doing a podcast with Jamie. They're like, oh my gosh, her editing is
Oh,
so
really?
good.
Thank you. Yeah, I started editing when I was like 12 too. I would edit. Did you play MapleStory?
I did not play Maple. I played Neopets, but I'm familiar with Maple
Oh, I
Story.
played Neopets too. But yeah, I would make MapleStory music videos, and then I would make music videos.
Would you make like AMVs and things
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that?
I did AMVs, yeah.
That
I
makes so much
loved
sense
it.
because like I was watching your content last night and I was so impressed that your reels, your shorts, they're not just like snippets of your stream. They're
Oh,
like
yes.
custom made. You're cooking, it's synced to a song, you're dancing, you've got animations. I was like, wow, this
Oh,
is so
thanks.
good.
Yeah, I really like I don't think it's impressing people because I had so many opportunities to like impress people. I feel like if I like focused on numbers or something, it would still be impressive, but I really love providing a feeling to people. And just like whether that's like comfort or like dopamine or like, oh, this is fun to watch, like entertainment. Like I just like providing some sort of feeling. And I watch so many creators or like listen to podcasts and it inspires me so much. Like sometimes you just need another perspective.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I love about content. And I try to keep that in mind when I make.
You mentioned like wanting your content to help people feel a
Oh,
feeling.
yes, yes.
And because you yourself have watched a lot of things that have changed the way you've thought and felt about things. I was going to ask, what are examples of that for you that you look back, you're like, that was meaningful?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I actually don't think I could like recollect.
Yeah, it's just
A
the
lot.
general
It's just
fact that you
so
watch so
many.
much and you absorb it.
Because I think for me, like my brain like goes like 300 thoughts per second
Yeah.
sometimes, and so it's really hard to get out of that loop. So even I'll like listen to someone talk about like plants or something super mundane, and I'll be like, oh, I know what I need to do. Like for my next content idea, or like, oh, I know, and I don't know. That's why I keep saying like the intuition part of your brain is just like working. Like my consciousness likes activity.
Yeah.
So that's why I prefer like living in the city versus like a suburban area because I feel like my brain just does really good with any sort of stimulation.
Yeah. What I'm kind of hearing, it's like the same reason you said you watch reality TV shows.
Yeah.
You overstimulate your mind, and there's so many things going on.
Yeah.
You know you'll pick up on something that'll stay in your head.
Yeah.
That you'll end up doing something about it later.
Yes. Yeah.
I super get that.
Yeah.
Do you watch the content of your friends?
It depends on which friends, but it's
Yeah.
also hard because I look at it differently. Like it's kind of like when you see the content of your friends, it's very like, oh my God, like I love watching what they're doing and stuff like that. But I don't view it in the, I guess, critical eye that I'll view my own content. So I
Yeah.
sometimes can't really get, I guess, like my entertainment and like friends' mind is a little bit different from like my creative mind.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so with my friends, I watch their content, but in a more endearing, like, oh, I want to know what they're doing kind of thing, like following their journey sort of thing. But actually, I love listening to like, do you know the neuroscience guy podcast?
Which one?
The neuroscience guy.
No,
You
what's
should
that?
listen to
Okay.
him. He does like little bits of like, he'll talk about something super mundane or plain, like, what's a good one? I don't know, like dogs or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And then he'll talk about like the neuroscience behind it. I love stuff like that because it like stimulates my brain without making me overthink. Versus like sometimes if I'm going through a hard time, if I listen to something that's too like emotionally heavy, it might make me overthink more. But I love listening to things that like will light up parts of my brain, but they're not overwhelming informations. So yeah, I love overstimulating my brain with like random things. That's why I just know so many facts about like random things that have
Because
nothing
you
to
just
do with
learned
me.
so much.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, I consume like voracious amounts of content
Oh,
across.
really?
I recently brought in a new team member onto Karat. And then
Yeah.
he was just like, you know so much about so many random things. Like, why?
Yeah.
And the real answer is just like 3 a.m. Wikipedia holes.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, oh, if I'm like feeling sad about something, I'll just like distract myself by like, just let's like learn about like 1700s like potato agriculture. Like, that's interesting. Why
Wait,
not?
you would like, there's a podcast called can't sleep, and it's this guy with the most mundane voice. He literally just reads like Wikipedia articles of like carpet or like
Wow.
hinges, like door hinges, and it just puts me to sleep. But I'll also learn like a few facts about door hinges.
You're like, yes, I love it. You've like all these things. You've been through so many story arcs from young Jaime. You're like, I've learned how to handle this about myself.
Yeah, it's true. I'm telling you, you caught me at a good time.
What can I ask for our last question? When you think back to all the previous iterations of you and the stories you had about yourself, because you mentioned you like to romanticize, right? Like picture like this is the story, this is the plot,
Yeah.
this is the genre I'm in right now. What are the biggest stories about yourself that you had to unlearn or decide like, you know, I used to think this about myself, or I'm thinking this about myself now, and like this isn't right. This is not the right story.
Yeah. I think at some point I felt like everything is up to me. I felt like it was up to me to take care of my family, and like up to me to achieve what I wanted, up to me to be like the most easy, agreeable, fun person to be around. And then at some point I was like, no, like I need to do things for myself, and I just need to be okay with that. And also be okay that like things are going to take time. Like I'm not this like special human that is supposed to do things like the best way possible. Like I'm just human and everyone else is. And I think reframing it in a way where I could just enjoy life and romanticize it, kind of like a slice of life anime. Like I was like, you know what? Maybe I don't need to be like freaking like Haikyuu, like get to the finals or whatever. I could just be like slice of life anime, like make cup noodles and like just try to live my life and make good memories with people that I love. I think that's helped me a lot.
Wait, I love you are in your slice of life era.
Yeah.
I love that. Jaime, thanks so much for making time today.
Yeah,
and that's
of
a wrap.
course. That was really fun.
Yeah,
You're really good at this. Wow.
Well, I mean, you are too. It takes two to tango.
Oh, that's true. Maybe it's a type 4. Type 4 together.
It's a type. No, I mean, if I'm being super honest, that's why I asked you to do the pod.
Oh, really?
Right? Like, it was two things. One, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, we didn't get to speak that much, but even in the brief period of time, I'm like, oh, like, here's a person I'd love to get to know better.
Oh, yeah.
Like, here's a friendship I want to develop.
Yeah.
And this also goes back to the previous point we said. We're like, hey, like, when you create content with your friends, right? It's like work, but it's also fun.
It's fun. Yeah.
Exactly. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, I think it'll be a good podcast, but also I'm interested in getting to know you better. And so it's like a win-win both ways. But yeah, I remember when we were talking about the Enneagram and everything, I was just like, oh, like she gets it.
Yeah. If you know, you know.
Yeah. If you know, you know, she's vibing.
Yeah.
I never for once would have thought you were a type 7. So, but maybe that's because I
really?
got to interact with you in real
Yeah, our
life.
first impression, I already
Versus
told you. Yeah.
like the edited reels where you're just like,
yeah.
which is a part of you,
Literally, yeah.
but not the only part of you.
Yeah. It's like a Snickers bar. Is that the one that's layered?
I think so. I actually don't eat candy, so I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
Or like the Shrek comparison, it's like an onion. There's like layers.
Yeah, like an onion. Yeah, an onion. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
All right.
better.
Beautiful. So I was also conscious of time. It's 1:20.
Okay.
So we have enough time.